Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Love Your Vibe podcast. I'm your host, Sean Robert Grant, aka Sean Grant. Thank you for joining me today on this beautiful Friday. Absolutely lovely. Just getting started right off the bat. You know, it's one of those things. It's been almost a week since Kobe Bryant had passed. And so, I always attempted to make a point, and this was after Michael Jackson had passed back in 2009, that I was going to always allow life to work through me. I was always going to allow life to do what life felt was best. When I say life, I mean God, I mean source, I mean all that is. I always ensure that I would be an open vessel. And how do you do that? You just be open and you just be willing to allow it to unfold and to do that through you. And you'll be just so blown away by what spirit, life, source, the all that is can do through you. Okay? So today's show, I just wanted to take a moment to remember Kobe just a bit, and then I wanted to show you how to implement or integrate the Mamba mentality, because there's so much going out there about what the Mamba mentality actually is. But I want to get into it because I have a bit of a story that I'll share here in just a bit. But let's take a moment to just remember Kobe Bryant. And I'm going to tell you from my perspective, which is the perspective of a lot of our listeners. A lot of our listeners, and that is, let's just say if you were an inner city African-American kid growing up, or you're that right now, or, a kid of any ethnicity, and you're really into sports, athletics, competing, basically. If that's you in the last 20 years, actually last 20-something years, you have been exposed to who Kobe Bryant was. Now, I had the great fortune of seeing Michael Jordan in his prime, and I tell you, it was something to see, right? This is why Michael Jordan is pretty much revered as the greatest basketball of all time. If you could have actually seen the ability he had, it was almost like there comes a time where there's a certain athlete who looks like he's been thrusted back to the past from the future to play in an era where nobody really had the skill set, the tools, the mentality, because the Mamba mentality is a lot of Jordan's, ideals and things he held near and dear to his heart as he was, conducting not only basketball, but his life. And so around that time of 20 so years, Kobe Bryant came onto the scene. And, it was interesting because when Kobe came into the league, there were so many knacks on him about why he wouldn't succeed. Because, he came out of Lower Merion High School. He didn't really go to college. And so I can remember being drafted by Charlotte and then being traded to Los Angeles. And I just remember all the knacks. He's got average athletic ability. He has a tendency to hog the ball. He has it was all these negative knacks on this guy. So you didn't really know what it was you're going to get from him, right? So he came in his first year, he showed some really, really amazing flashes, but nothing near what he would actually become. And then him and Michael Jordan became close, right? Because Kobe had it in his heart that he wanted to be the best. That was his primary objective. So he started training with Tim Grover, this guy who's like basically the trainer to all like really, really top athletes. He basically, his claim to fame is he trained Michael Jordan his entire career, and he was the reason that Jordan was able to lift the Bulls over the Pistons back in all those days when the bad boys would just basically obliterate them physically and mentally. So that's who Tim Grover is. He has a great book out. I don't know the name of it, but I read it a couple years ago. It's actually pretty good. But so anyway, that was Kobe's objective. And that is where the Mamba mentality was born. Now, before we get into that, you can look at his career and see the trajectory that took place of him rising from this kid who people had their doubts with to being basically, in the same sentence as Michael Jordan, as Bird, as Magic, as LeBron now. Like, he just wasn't handed that, right? That was his objective. And it was, a lot of times we think it's the physical part that's the hardest to be able to implement that, but it's actually your mental. The mental aspect that's the toughest, because the mental has to convince you so you can get the emotional aspect of everything moving forward. And this is what's so impressive about Kobe, because if you play basketball can be hard on the joints. Running on that hard wood floor for hundreds of times throughout games, and the NBA playing 82 plus playoff games, it can be really hard on your joints, especially, if you're really heavy, it's even more of a problem. I once saw Rick Fox came into a workout I was doing in Los Angeles at that time when I was a fitness trainer, and I swear he looked like an old man. He was limping, like his hips. He had just had hip surgery or something like that. And I was like, are you okay? He said, yeah, just surgeries and getting over basketball. So that kind of gives you an idea of what the hardwood can do to you over time. And so, anywho, we're just looking back at what Kobe meant, not only to sports, but to life. And I'm talking to us that are true sports fans that lived his triumphs, that lived through the trial of him being accused of rape and all this other stuff. And it's really something special. And I think that's the reason why when a guy is so unapologetically authentic to himself and believes in himself that much, we can't help as spiritual beings having a human experience to admire that. And when you take, when there's a void, when that spirit, when that life force is taken from the earth, everybody feels it, right? We look on social media and we everybody, not everybody, but a lot of people are thinking, well, why are people taking Kobe's death so hard? Well, it's like I said before, in 2009, Michael Jackson died, and that void was, when he left this earth, even though he wasn't himself towards the end, when he left this earth, it was like darkness, right? It was like the Savior had left, not to be religious or anything like that, but I felt that void so strongly, right? And I've kind of observed the same thing with Kobe, because with Michael Jackson, and the same with Kobe, you think these guys are absolutely invincible. You think that nothing is going to stop them at any point in time. And then death, who none of us can stop, comes and takes him, and it's just like, whoa, like what's really going down, right? So when you see that, and you see the type of impact he's had on so many people, it makes sense that people would mourn his death, and ESPN is still playing tributes, and the NBA will still be paying tributes to him throughout the rest of the season, and then probably long after that, because here's a guy that did so much for basketball. Here's a guy that did so much for people. Here's a guy that did so much charity, but still kind of gets a bad name, because the most amazing thing I find about Kobe, and this kind of tells you who he was as a person, he would do all of this charity work, all this PR, all these visiting these sick kids, these lower income, like housing individuals. Like he would do things out of the goodness of his heart. And you know what his only stipulation was? No PR. No PR. Now, most people, they want to see their good deeds done because they want to have people observing them being in their best light. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's human, right? But for this man to say, you know what? Yeah, this may make me look like an angel. This may make me look like, something in the eyes of others. But guess what? I don't care about that. That's not what matters. And that is one of the most significant points of the Mamba mentality, is that do what you do from your heart because you love it, not because of what you're going to get out of it. And I think with Kobe, it's so dynamic and profound to see that from a guy who's in the celebrity light, day in and day out. Like, he loved basketball, right? He loved basketball. And through loving basketball, that was only his objective. He loved it, and it returned that love back by allowing him to be as good as he was and as successful as he was. And so, although he had his issues, it wasn't like he was doing it to get something back. It was the love that was returned from the giving of the love that he possessed, or that he was offering to basketball, that made everything worthwhile. And so what happens if we do this with our lives, right? Because so many of us work jobs because it's just for the money, right? So many of us, I was talking about jealousy yesterday. We fall into jealousy because we refuse to look at the gifts that would make us the Kobe Bryant of our life, right? We refuse to look at those gifts. We refuse to embrace them. So it's easier to be jealous against someone else because they found their gift and they're living for the love of that gift and expressing it. And that's all we need to do. You find that thing that accentuates your why for being here, right? You find that thing that accentuates your why for being here, and you just become a master at it. You keep doing it. And the great thing about passion for something and having a strong why is that it will reveal its secrets to you, right? You will learn stuff through your passion about things because God works off of desire. You will learn stuff about that thing that nobody else can. I experienced this in my life with fitness. Like, there were individuals who had way more credentials than I did, but I was what you would call an intuitive fitness professional, right? And what I mean by that is I basically felt it. And some people wouldn't do stuff because of how they were trained, but I never let that stop me. I never let that stop me from attempting to do something that I know was going to succeed because I felt it within, right? And that's another aspect of the Mamba mentality, and I kind of already gotten into the integrating part, but it's being intuitive with what you really feel and trusting yourself above all else, right? Everybody's a goddamn critic. It seems nowadays. And people always want to tell you what you can do and what you can't do, what's right and what's not right. Excuse my French, but fuck that. Life is too short for us to be living for other people. We have to live for ourselves and then allow other people to see that example and raise up their own lives through that. So, especially if it's somebody who lives their life in fear and who is a born people pleaser. People pleasers are very dangerous in the sense that they will stop at taking a chance that feels completely authentic to them because of what they might think other people may say about them, right? And so, not to judge in any shape or form, but it's just allowing everyone to see how detrimental something like that can be to your success in life, okay? And so that's kind of the next point with the Mamba mentality. So Kobe was not shy about getting in teammates' face, getting in the face of management. Here's a guy that is completely committed to winning, completely committed to being his very best, and he's going to do everything he can. He dedicates his life. He dedicates his life to winning, to being successful. So if somebody else doesn't share that same objective, then they can't be in the building, right? And what does that mean? If you know somebody doesn't share your same objective, you're trying to weed out. You're weeding that out. You're not trying to let it grow and then all of a sudden it becomes a cancer and then everybody turns on each other. That's not what it comes down to, right? So it's like, if you see something is wrong, if you see something is not right or where it should be, don't hesitate to call it out. And I'm not saying you got to get in somebody's face and grab their shirt, but no, if you're working in a group and you see somebody, like even in your relationship, we oftentimes want to just kind of walk on eggshells, but in your relationship, if you feel like somebody, the other person, your spouse, your partner is not up to speed, figure out what's going on, because once again, life is too short to find yourself waiting till tomorrow to feel your best, or saying, oh, you know what, I'm just going to take this day for granted and not really do much. No, like figure out what the issue is now, fix it, and then move forward, because everybody benefits. Everybody benefits, right? Everybody benefits. So the next thing here, and moving into integrating the Mamba mentality, is just knowing when to turn it off. So I picked up this book because there's an entire book on it, and I just read a few pages. I was in Barnes and Nobles, I think, last year at some point. And, Kobe talked a little bit about being able to turn it off, right? And turning it off meant that he knew when to be tender, he knew when to be compassionate, and he knew when somebody needed a kick in the ass, right? And all that is getting back to that whole intuitive aspect, feeling what needs to be done at this point, right? Feeling what needs to be done. And when you feel into that, then you can make your decision. But knowing when to turn it off, right? You can't be Mamba all the time. I mean, you can be Mamba all the time, but you can't be Mamba who is ruthless, right, all of the time. There has to be an aspect of you that scales back. So know when to turn that off. And lastly, I think the thing that really sums up, the Mamba mentality, and also, Napoleon Hill talks a little bit about it in Think and Grow Rich. Desire. Desire is what makes the Mamba mentality what it is. Why? Because your desire is what will push you through every single obstacle, impediment that comes up, whether it's people, places, or things. You will not be stopped. You just won't. Can you imagine how amazing you would be at whatever it is you chose if you knew in your heart you would not be stopped, right? And the beauty of it is when people begin to tell you that you need to stop, is when you really know that you're on point, that you're really doing something, because you're sticking with it longer than anybody would have done. But the truth of the matter is, and this is something we need to really take into account, God gave you the dream. He didn't give it to anybody else. So they're not going to feel the same way about it. They're going to think you're nuts. God gave you the dream, right? So he's going to say, what are you going to do with this dream that I give you? What are you going to use? How are you going to use that desire that I gave you to follow this dream and to continually build on this desire and to realize it eventually, right? That's the most important thing. Now, I mentioned a story that I came across the other day. I actually posted it on my Facebook story. Might still be there, but anywho, I want to tell you the story, and then I'm going to let you go. But I just found it so so epic, so epically Kobe. And it just when you admire greatness, when you admire greatness, which can be hard for a lot of people, but when you admire greatness and you admire somebody who's truly a master of their craft. Allen Iverson had just got into the league, and Iverson was saying that, the first time they played in LA, Kobe came to his hotel. He picked him up. He took him to a restaurant, and they went out to eat. And the dinner was ending, and he asked Allen Iverson. He said, "Yo, Al," he said, "What you up to tonight?" Allen Iverson's 20, 21 years old. He said, "Oh man, I'm going to the club." And he's like, and Kobe's like, "Oh, okay." He said, "I'm going to the gym." And just that simple story shows you. Now, Iverson is one of the greatest players ever. And eventually he said he understood what it meant. But to show you where Kobe was, right? As far as his dedication, his desire, his intuitiveness to always be on top of the desire, of the energy that was being given through the desire to capitalize on it, right? Because we all get the energy. It just depends on if we're going to capitalize on it or not, right? And that's the truth of the matter. That's all that it comes down to. You got the energy for something. You got the desire for something. Are you taking the action, right? And it doesn't even need to be obsessive. It just needs to be in perfect timing. And that's really all it comes down to. That's how you succeed in a way that you can feel good about your life. And that's all we really want. This whole situation has really shown us, go after what you want in life. Feel good about your life. Last 5-6 days, I've been feeling really good about who I am and what I've been able to do since I've entered this earth 38, 39 years ago, almost 39 years. But, you just want to feel good about yourself and about what you're doing while you're here. And that's all that counts. Guys, thank you so much for joining me. It has been a pleasure. Remember, Mamba mentality, implement it in your life. If you have any questions, feel free to shoot me a message. Other than that, have a wonderful day. Happy Friday to you once again. We'll talk soon. Take care.